everyone. I'm Paula Guthett, co-founder and programmer at Cinema Detroit, an independent nonprofit community-based art house theater in greater downtown Detroit. Welcome to our discussion of Two Gods. Ordinarily, this discussion would be taking place in person at Cinema Detroit, but we're still temporarily closed, and I'm still programming films online, mostly on our streaming platform, Cinema Detroit Marquee, which is where you can watch this film, Two Gods, for the next couple of weeks at least, and many others while supporting us at the same time. Info on all our films is available at our website, cinemadetroit.org, which contains all things Cinema Detroit, including links to follow us on our social media and sign up for our weekly emails. Two Gods is a documentary about Hanif, a Black Muslim casket maker who mentors two young men from his community, one Muslim and the other Christian, to help them avoid his past mistakes. The film follows the ups and downs in their lives over several years. Critics call it a poetic meditation that's timely, beautiful, and profound. Richard Daniels, in his review for RogerEbert.com, wrote that Two Gods elucidates profound meaning from Hanif's important trade by taking interest in people of color while they're still alive, not just in their deaths. Two Gods is also a New York Times Critics pick. The director of Two Gods, Zeshawn Ali, is joining us tonight. He is originally from Ohio and is a graduate of Tisch School of the Arts at New York University. Two Gods is his first feature and has received support from ITVS, Tribeca Film Institute, Ford Foundation, Sundance Institute, Doc Society, Points North Institute, and IFP. He is a member of Brooklyn Filmmakers Collective and Meerkat Media. He is currently based in New York. Also joining us is Aman Ali, the producer of Two Gods. He is an award-winning storyteller in New York City. He's made appearances on dozens of media outlets, such as the New York Times, BuzzFeed, CNN, NBC News, HBO, BBC, and NPR. He first gained fame for being the co-creator of the social media phenomenon 30 Mosques in 30 Days, a 25,000-mile road trip he took to all 50 states, with the mission of telling groundbreaking and profound stories about Muslims in America. Moderating the discussion is Leah Vernon. Leah V is an inclusive content creator, educator, motivational speaker, and plus-size hijabi model from Detroit. Her content has garnered over 1 million views combined, and she's been featured in media platforms from the New York Times to BuzzFeed. Leah V has devoted herself to promoting body positivity, pushing people to live their best life and find the beauty in their uniqueness. Through her platform, she hopes to be the representation she needed when she was younger. In 2019, Leah V released her first memoir titled Unashamed: Musings of a Fat Black Muslim, which outlines the struggle of living in a marginalized body. So congratulations, Zeshawn and Aman, on the film and the great reception that it's getting. I'm so grateful to have you here, and thank you to Leah for moderating. I'm going to go ahead and step out now, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. All righty. So welcome, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you for coming tonight. We're going to have so much fun. I like to start off all of my moderations, or if I'm speaking or if I'm speaking to somebody else, with making sure that understand this is an open space. It is a safe space. You're able to ask questions. We'll definitely get to them at the end of this. And to keep an open mind. And keep some good vibes. So thank you so much, Aman and Zeshawn. Okay. I don't want to say it like I might say it fancy. Zeshawn.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me, and congratulations on this film. I have so many amazing questions to ask you guys about this, and I'm sure people are dying to know, as well as me. But I just want to say, so Aman actually invited me to preview this film before it was released last year. No, before COVID, actually. 2 years ago. And I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I like to say, because I'm from Detroit, that, I am I'm a thug. And, this film really pulled at my heartstrings. I actually cried. I did. A couple times. I was trying to hold it in, but it came out because this film, it really did something to me. And I came out of this film a changed person. Honestly, I did. And so basically this film is the Black Muslim portrayal. It's definitely a tearjerker. So if you have seen it, get those tissues ready. And it's presented in such a poetic way, which I really enjoyed.
I would love to hear what came up for you when you were watching it. You said it changed you. Like, can you tell me a little bit more deeper, like what was coming up for you?
Yeah, I think because a lot of times, I mean, I'm a storyteller as well, and a lot of my stories are based on the narrative of a Black Muslim woman, right? And our fragility and our vulnerability. And so this film actually gave me the other side of some of my traumas, right? A lot of my traumas have come from Black Muslim men and Black men and the Muslim community. And so when you have felt trauma from a certain kind of person, you're kind of like, oh no, they're an object. They're not complex. They're a monolith. And so this film actually opened my eyes up about my own stereotypes that I feel for certain individuals in my own community. And so that's what I want to say is definitely it's showing the vulnerable side of manhood and boyhood. So that's how it changed me. So enough about what I feel. Let's talk. let's get into this. Okay. So I have a lot of good questions in here. Some are messy. The first one is why the name Two Gods? I was lurking on your Instagram page, your Facebook page, and saw a lot of people, Muslims, okay, some of your friends, some trolls, I don't know, don't quote me, but some of them were very upset about the name Two Gods. Can you either one of you tell me why the name and why would that be controversial?
Do you want to take it, Zeshawn?
Yeah, I mean, so the first part of your question, why the name Two Gods? It actually came from a conversation very, very early in the processes of us sort of filming, but just spending time in the community. And we had spent time with a funeral director. And she was just talking about, we were reflecting on her work, and specifically her work as somebody who was tending to those that have passed. And she started kind of reflecting on something that felt different in the experience of preparing the bodies. And one of the tragic things that she was witnessing was that the people that were coming into a funeral home were not dying of natural causes. They weren't dying of old age. It was like societal issues were taking its toll. And she was seeing that firsthand. And we thought that was really powerful because we very rarely think of the labor of those that tend to the dead in that sort of way of like understanding the needs of the community in real time. And she said something that was really powerful. That was kind of like, she said, a lot of times people think that like, you can have two gods and you can hold them with the same sort of weight. You can think about worshiping God and you can think about worshiping, she said, like the streets or this idea of survival, but you can't. They come in direct conflict with one another. But that's not a bad thing. That's human. Like that's not through a lens of judgment. It's through a lens of sort of understanding that faith is never practiced in a bubble. It's never practiced in a vacuum. And I think sometimes the danger of talking about faith is when you talk about it as though it does. We all on a human level need to make real choices in real time. And sometimes that aligns with the path towards God or this like sort of high moral ground that we're taught. And sometimes it's just like, I need to do what I can to take care of myself and to take care of my well-being in this moment in time. And to us, that's where it started. And what the Two Gods ended up becoming was this constant sort of juxtaposition, these choices that we make on a daily basis that to me unites us all as human beings. And it kind of took on this sort of universal theme. And the film plays with a lot of sort of like playing of two things, life and death, young and old, Islam and other faiths, these choices that we're always making, these dualities that exist in our lives. And it was just a really sort of beautiful metaphor in that sort of way. As far as how the Muslim community takes it, our title has definitely not always been well received, but we kind of lean into that. Aman, I mean, you can probably speak to that probably more than I can.
Yeah, what I will say is very similar to this film. The title, we leave a lot of things open-ended. And Leah, and the reason why I was curious to hear your reaction about the film was because this film brings out so many different reflections in different people. And I think the title will do the same thing. People interpret it in different ways. And that's what we want, because we want this film to evoke thoughts and feelings. And we're not here to impose a point of view or say this and that. This is what the title meant to us, and this is why we put it together, and this is why we put the film together in this particular way. But we embrace that. We embrace that based on your experiences, based on how you were raised, and based on who you are. Naturally, whether it's the title or moments in this film, it's going to bring up different things for different people. But yes, there's people that haven't seen the film, see the title, haram, blah blah blah, and I'm like, whatever. I don't even get mad at it. I'm just like, just be gone. Just be gone.
Thanos snap. Go on.
Yeah. They went from your page to my page. They just like go back and forth. Mr. Haram.
Oh my God. The Haram police, they are always on deck. Don't ever think that they're not. They're waiting in a bush ready for you. Just remember that. Eyes is on you. Thank you so much for those very eloquent answers and responses. Appreciate that. We're going to bounce around a little bit. So the next question is, why choose the film to be in black and white? I mean, where I was thinking about like trying to think why you guys chose that or why your team chose that. And especially with all the racial, political situations going on and stuff like that, injustices happening, it was interesting because I'm like, it kind of reminded me of how sometimes white people will say, oh, I don't see color. Right. And so I don't know, maybe I'm way off base here, but why did you choose black and white?
There's kind of like, it's a complex answer, but I think I'll simplify it in the sense that, for one, early on in the process, we knew that we were wanting to tell a film that kind of juxtaposed this sort of the beauty of the rituals around death. Like there was such a beautiful intimacy around that, but it also, with just as much weight, we wanted to hold it with equal weight, the beauty of coming of age, these moments in these young men's lives that are also profound, that are also meaningful, that are also spiritual. And I was like, from a functional standpoint, creatively, it was a statement that was like, we're going to hold these rituals of prayer and tending to those that have passed, this sort of grandness of these spiritual gestures, with the same weight as a young man holding a squirt gun on a summer day and like finding his meaning for the first time. Like those are spiritual acts in and of itself, whether we understand it or not. So that was like one approach. And what we also found was like, we actually found by taking away the sort of like color and by taking away the sort of, the surface level, you're left with the intimate details in a real tangible way. We wanted this film to feel, you wanted to feel every details. We wanted you to feel the sawdust on a casket. We wanted you to feel the water running down an arm during a washing, the ways in which like light reflects in a young man's eyes, like when you're really close with him, like those intimate details, I wanted in that sort of like editorial process to take on metaphorical meanings, because our communities, people of color, Muslim, the Black community, like our agency has been taken away. Our heart, our humanity, our artistry, our sort of profoundness, our spirituality, it's been so sort of separated from our identity. And we wanted everything in this film to be kind of like a beautiful, grand love letter to like what makes our daily existence spiritual and beautiful at the same time. So to me, like the black and white started as like, this helps with the edit. Like it helps kind of meld these worlds, but we kind of fell in love with it as time went on, because we were like, this affirms everything that we wanted this statement of this film to be, which was that our existence is beautiful. Our existence is vulnerable and tender and care, like filled with care.
Yeah, and I'll also say that the color choices was also an extension of our filmmaking. Newark is very similar, in my opinion, is very similar to a city like Detroit that is grossly misunderstood by the outside world as this just racist stereotypes about crime, poverty, all these like horrible things. But there's a reason why people live there. There's a reason why people take pride and joy being from Newark, being from Detroit. There is a joy, and there is a history, there is a generational joy. And so our approach to filmmaking was, let's see people the way they see themselves. Let's celebrate and capture the beauty with the way that people see beauty within themselves. And so, yeah, the black and white choices was naturally an extension of that.
Okay, cool. Because I was wondering, like, what was that about? Like, I don't really. You know, I'm on the book side of things, but I've never done like a movie or a documentary or anything like that. And I was like, okay, this is an interesting choice, but I do think it gave it some extra intimacy. I do feel like it gave like that level of like kind of mystery almost for me. And so I think that was really done well, because a lot of films are not in black and white anymore. So that was definitely were you scared to use black and white at all? Were you like, oh, is this gonna like come off as this? Is it not going to be like more modern looking? Were there any concerns about that?
Yeah, I mean, we got a lot of pushback early on, especially in the film space. I mean, I think a lot of people said like, no one is going to want to watch a black and white documentary, especially a black and white documentary about the subject matters that you're exploring. And we kind of realized that like those weren't the people that we were trying to reach with our film. Like we wanted I was like, okay, respectfully, like, I don't think you understand like why this is important, and that's okay. Like it's important to us because it sort of like upholds the beauty. Not to say that a film in color would have been any less beautiful. I think it felt right with this story. It felt right with the ways that we were telling it, the ways that we were shooting it. So I think the black and white actually made us more confident in a lot of ways, and the choices that we were making. And that felt good. Like it felt good to make that decision early, to know like who was supporting the sort of vision that we had early on, and who was kind of like, we had some very wild meetings where people were like maybe halfway through the film, it like bursts into color, and like when everything gets better, and we're just like, you know, that really like cool idea, but like not really what we're going for. So it's open to interpretation in many ways.
Yeah, we made sure to check ourselves early on that this wasn't a gimmick. And like I said, this was a natural extension of our approach to filmmaking. And it's funny because, as Zeshawn mentioned, initially people, when we were pitching this, 5-6 years ago when we first started working on this and pitching it to people, we would often get questions like, why is this in black and white? I don't want to support this in black and white. But then as we stuck to our vision, people literally tell us, I can't imagine this film in anything other than black and white. I can't imagine this film in color. And so, again, it's about sticking to your vision and telling the story that you want to tell. And yes, people will have feedback. And we took that into consideration. We didn't just shrug it off, but we made sure that we were very purposeful with that.
Okay. Amazing. Well, thank you for that. And so the next question. So this might be, well, now I'm just going to go all the way in. So you two are not black. You are two brown men. Just throwing it out there. I don't know for sure. I'm just kidding. You're two brown men. You're not black men. I'm sure you know a lot of brown men and maybe women casket makers. I'm sure you have come across. Why you? Why did you decide that this is a story I need to tell, instead of using a brown man casket maker? Why a black Muslim male casket maker? Why you? Or why both of you?
Totally. And it's a very valid question and conversation. And I think it's something that we very much own and don't shy away from. And I think that in telling this story, not only that, we're not from Newark, New Jersey. We're from the Midwest. And those are things that we wanted to make sure that we owned and acknowledged that, yes, we're Muslim. There is some commonality between our experiences, but that said, we are not black. We are not from Newark. And so with that, those are things that we own, and we made sure to really take our time. We probably spent 5, 6, maybe even 7 months without even filming, just hanging out in the community, meeting the OGs, learning about history, really ingraining ourselves in the community. And again, our approach to filmmaking was not imposing our point of view. It was seeing people the way they see themselves and letting them be the guiding light behind it. And for us, we wanted to tell this story because, it goes without saying, it's the Muslim American narrative in this country is so marginalized. It's very often a monolithic narrative that's about 9/11 or immigration or, all those other stories. And those are great stories, but stories about a Black American Muslim community that has nothing to do with crime, nothing to do with terrorism, violence, or anything like that. And it's also deeply, richly rooted in spirituality those are the things that we wanted to really share with people because we thought it was important to share that. And that said, we wanted to make sure that we did right by the community, because as fortunate as we are about success and what people think about it, what was most important for us is making sure the community bought in. And so not only our subjects, but other people in the community, we share with them footage along the way and share with them scenes and showed them the film, because we wanted them to feel like, oh, that's me up there. I don't know that person, but I know that person. And we wanted to make sure that they truly felt seen in this narrative. And so, yes, so the short way to answer your question is, yes, we own that. And we try to do everything we can, not only how we approach filmmaking, but making sure that our film team and people that we consulted with had a meaningful input as well. That doesn't mean that we're perfect. Doesn't mean we pat ourselves in the back and we get an A+ or anything like that. But we acknowledge our shortcomings and we make sure that we do as much as we can to address those gaps. Zeshawn, I don't know if you had any.
I mean, I think, it's such an important question. It's actually one that I reflect on a lot, especially as we're getting the film out into the world, because, for me personally, we didn't know we were making a film. When we were spending time with Hanif, it's the goal was to never make a movie. We met Hanif at a washing. There was and for me on a personal level, we were at a washing just there to kind of observe and learn and just be sort of contributors in some way. It was the first time that I had ever been at a washing in my whole life. I'd never been, I was fortunate enough at that point to have never had a loved one pass away. And I was very sort of emotionally, it was a lot. It's a lot to be in a space like that for the first time. And Hanif pulled us aside afterwards. He never knew us. He did not know us. We were meeting him for the first time, and he was like, "Let's grab lunch. Let's talk. Let's talk. I want to share with my experiences." And it genuinely was we formed such a beautiful friendship. And friendship is actually the wrong word. I call Hanif my older brother. He genuinely is somebody that we prayed together. We laughed together, we cried together. Hanif taught us how to wash our father when our father passed away. We celebrate birthdays together. It's the film is secondary. The film is actually just a reflection of this chapter that we shared in our lives. And so does our identity, it's important to think about in the sense that that's actually why the collaboration with Hanif as an equal contributor to this film was deeply important, because it was listen, he trusted us to tell his story in this intimate way. Furquan trusted us to tell this story in this really intimate way. But we had to listen. We had to really lean in and listen and be wait a minute, how do you want this story told? How do you want this story to feel? What is important to uplift and what is important to move away from? And that was constantly we were always our subjects advocates in every pitch meeting, in every edit room, in every music composing session, because there was a deep trust that they gave to us. And on a personal level, I take that trust the most seriously, even to this day. So it's it's something that we need to acknowledge. And especially in the documentary community, there's a power imbalance. It's we're holding a camera and we're putting it, that's something that the documentary community is reckoning with on a daily basis, especially when you're an outsider. But I think for me, it goes back to kind of what we talked about earlier, is to me, this film was a love letter to these people that have become so integral to our lives. It's everything that we did was to represent the sort of human spirit and the love and the care that the subjects gave to each other. But actually the film feels so intimate and loving and caring because that's what they gave to us. They gave us nothing but love and care and respect and admiration. So I wanted to make sure that was reflected in what was seen and what the audience to see in the film.
Wow, that was deep. I was taking it all in. Because sometimes, you know this in this industry, both of you know this, but people come into Black people's communities and want to get famous off them. They want to exploit them. There's so many documentaries, so many movies, so many, you both know this, you have to in this industry. And so I always ask anybody who is non-Black telling a Black story, that question, because behind the scenes, it's one thing. In front of the scenes, it's a whole different situation, right? And I liked what you just said. Hanif was an equal contributor, because that was going to be my next question. How many Black Muslims or Black individuals were a part of this process? Because it's not just like, okay, we're going to come in as non-Black people and tell your story, but how are they contributing to how their story is being told? You know what I mean? And so that was very eloquently stated, because I was like, if they say anything crazy, I'm getting both of them ASAP. Because like people tell us stories all the time, like tokenism, you know this, tokenism, exploitation, Black trauma porn. These are all topics that must be discussed when you're telling a Black person's story. So I do appreciate that. Let's get into the next question. I'm going to read this one off, actually. So there's topics that you guys dive into that aren't really portrayed in the media, especially surrounding ideologies that make Muslims look bad. And for everybody who knows, Muslims, and not just Muslims, but other organized religions, it is this kind of saying where it's just like, at least I look good on the outside, right? At least like I am doing what I need to do on the outside, when the inside is really messed up. But as long as you look great and you look like a good Muslim, right? You're giving salams, you're praying, you're fasting on the outer, long as that's good, who cares about the rest? And so a lot of organized religions have that ideology. And a lot of people, Muslims in the community don't want to look bad, right? Quote unquote bad. To outsiders or non-Muslims. So what are some of you guys' frustrations with that ideology? And also, what are some of your frustrations of the whole monolithic Muslim narrative?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot we can say on that. I think it really just comes down to being, I know it sounds corny, but being yourself. And I think that's what attracted us to Hanif in the film. Is Hanif is not a phony person. He said, I'm trying. I have shortcomings. I'm not proud of it. I'm not making excuses. There's a point in the movie he goes through a rough patch and he's like, yeah, I screwed up. This is my fault. And I think that's really what it comes down to. And I think, every community has that person that's holy on the outside, and once they step out of the mosque, they're whatever. But I don't know. I don't even pay much attention to those people. I pay more attention to the people that are trying really hard to do the right thing. But doing the right thing can be really hard sometimes and can be really stressful. And Leah, I mean, honestly, that's why we're friends. And that's why I like seeing what you write. You talk about these things. You're just like, I'm proud to be Muslim, but like, let me tell you, sometimes I don't feel like doing this, or this is really hard. Or like, man, I'm hungry and like Ramadan is like tough. And I think that's just what people relate to the most, is people that can be vulnerable and be true to who they are. They're not putting on some kind of a mask. So yeah, I could go on and on about that, but I think that's what people take resonance with so much with Hanif in this film, is he is truly a vulnerable person that wears his heart on his sleeve. And he has shortcomings, but he's also an incredibly honorable man. Despite, his challenges, he's a human being. But he's a human being that continues to push forward. And I know it sounds corny, but he's an inspiration. Like, he is a person that I strive to be.
Yeah, I mean, I also just feel like, on a personal level, like growing up, I felt sort of like almost like suffocated by like the expectations of like always being a good Muslim, because that's the only narratives I was consuming, were like the Muslims that were praying 5 times a day and like showing up to the mosque all the time and doing their fast correctly. And it's like, but what happens in the moments in life when like it feels like the earth below you is shattering, or it feels like you can't talk to God right now because like I'm struggling, I'm depressed, I'm exhausted, I'm really like struggling to find meaning in my life. And to me, like, the problem is when we erase those parts of our experiences, or we let people erase those parts of our experiences, we're setting ourselves up to fail on a human level. Because to me, like, caring for people is not only caring for them when they're at their highest, but it's caring for them when they're at their lowest. And if anything, it's showing up the most when they are down. And that's who Hanif is as a person. And that's why it was important that this film didn't shy away from that, because like my brother said, like Hanif is that person for everyone else, but also in his life, like he owns the difficulties, because he always says like I want people to know what I went through, because what I'm here is a statement to my strength. Like me showing up on a daily basis, me building caskets, me mentoring these kids is despite all of the things that life tried to pull me down with. Like that is the beauty. And I think that is like, I hope that going forwards, our narratives in the Muslim community are messy, they're complicated, they're sad, they're beautiful, they're joyful. Like we deserve all these shades of emotions in many ways, because I'm so tired of the sort of like the good Muslim narrative that's been sort of like, that was placed on us. I think it's changing now. We're a part of this sort of, there's storytellers in many different realms, like that are trying to push that needle. And I think with us, we were like, we don't want a documentary that fits neatly into any sort of box, because like those boxes were suffocating for us growing up.
Yeah, I think so that was like a kind of personal question of mine, because seeing Hanif's vulnerability and seeing that how he wears his heart on his sleeve, and that he was just like, you know what, this is my life, it happened. That's so refreshing. Just to go off a little side tangent, I was actually told by several Muslims that I was adding to Islamophobia because I was telling the truth about some of my stories. And I think that kind of mixed into what I asked you guys about, this making Muslims look bad, right? Because like I was told I was adding to Islamophobia, and I'm like, wow, that's a leap, but it's what it said, because I, again, like Zeshawn said, like we were fed that, and many Muslims are, and other organized religions are fed that perfect stereotype, or makes you look good on the outside to your community. But I want to get into a little bit of mess. So let's bounce back. So any drama, any setbacks before the film, during the film, or after the film that people will be shocked to know?
I wouldn't say drama or setbacks, but like Zeshawn said, we went into this film not to make a film. we're friends with Hanif, and that organically grew. And life happens. As you see in the film, Frequan goes through a tough situation at his home, and then all of a sudden moves to not only elsewhere, moves to a different state in North Carolina. So logistically, we're like, do we just stop filming with them? And then Nas goes through a rough patch and gets locked up. And we're like, do we not just stop? So yeah, we had to make decisions, but that's life. Life happens, and things come up, and challenges come along the way. And so I wouldn't really constitute that as drama. It's just, these are the moments that happen in life, and we were intrigued by how are they going to come together, and how are they going to push through these things? Because yes, you can fixate on these tough moments, but I think it's really beautiful to see, and I think that's where the joy in telling the story is seeing how they were pushing through those moments.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that the moments that you see on screen are incredibly. Our subjects go through a lot, and because we cared about our subjects so much, like all of those difficulties, like we felt them viscerally, like on a human level. I mean, to me, the hardest scene in this film, there's many hard scenes that sometimes it's actually hard for me to like watch the film, because you're watching like your loved ones go through something really difficult. There's one day, I'll never forget it. There's one day that you see it where Hanif kind of feels like he lost everything, and his car broke down. And that day was like on a human level, like this is somebody that you just love so deeply, and you're just like, how is this happening? Like, how is, like, everything is piling up, and you just want like the earth to stop. And I think what's unfortunate is I think going into this filmmaking process, we were kind of being spoken to by other documentary filmmakers. And there's this, I think, terrible perception that documentary filmmaking should be like from a distance or objective in any sort of way. We were literally told in spaces like, there needs to be a boundary that you set with your subjects. And I took deep offense to that. The more I was like, first of all, there's no boundaries in this filmmaking process, because like these are my people. Like these are the people that I care about. Like, you know, like if I'm gonna put the camera will stop rolling anytime. Like there's this perception in documentary film world that like you always roll the camera and like do what's best for the film, service the film. And I was like, absolutely not. Our editor sometimes like we would kind of get into like arguments because you'd be watching the footage, you'd be like, why did you put the camera down? Like, or like, oh, like if only you would have gotten this much more footage, if only you would have kept rolling. And it was like, I stopped rolling because like I needed to give them a hug and like make sure they were okay. Like I forgot to roll the camera because I was just being present on a human level, and nobody taught us that. Like it was this weird sort of juxtaposition where everyone in the film world, we felt like was telling films in one type of way. And to me, that felt deeply, I mean, it feels unethical in a lot of ways. It feels not good. Like the ways in which documentary filmmaking is often talked about or traditionally was talked about. And that I think was one of the hardest parts on a personal level, was like fighting that, undoing those things that we were taught, and realizing that like, that's why I always say the film was secondary for us. This was like, not about making a film.
Yeah, and just to echo that, yeah, we didn't treat them like subjects. We treated them like our friends. We talked to them like people. We weren't there to make a film. We were there to hang out. And there's very often, we also wanted to make sure that when we were hanging out, we didn't always have the camera with us. Sometimes we were just hanging out, grabbing a bite to eat. Sometimes it was like, hey, my friend's having a party. You want to come? All right, let's go. It's not always about everything has to be today about the documentary or this or that, because we wanted to make sure that they felt that we cared for them more than just this film. But to your question about drama, there was, now that I think about it, so in making this film, and like every filmmaker, you go to pitch meetings, you go to festivals, you're trying to network and talk to people. And early on, you just get a lot of just stupid, ignorant stuff. And it was just getting very exhausting because, again, there's this monolithic narrative, and some programmers will be like, oh, we're already supporting this film about surveillance post 9/11. I'm like, okay, you can only have one? Do you have your black film too? Do you have your gay film and your woman film and your Asian film or this or that? And I would get really frustrated by that, because a lot of people would ask stupid questions like, oh, are these kids going to join a gang? Oh, is this like ISIS? Is he trying to like pull them away from ISIS? Like people, like literally heads of like networks were like, and like big name people were like saying the most ignorant stuff. And I think for us, it just reaffirmed why we need to tell stories like this, why we need to tell nuanced stories that don't fit into this neat little, checked off box or some quota or something like that. We wanted to tell this story because we wanted to tell this story, not because it needs to fill this hole or something like that.
Wow. Do you guys, I had like another question, but as you guys were talking, another question came up. It seems like this film was very was an emotional roller coaster because you were so close to the participants. Do you think that you would do this again? Because I think it was a couple years. Also, you are close with the participants. They're your family. They're your friends. Would you do it like this again?
I think that's such an interesting question, and it's interesting because there was like kind of beauty in going into these waters with no precedent set. Like I think like we never made a film before. I had never shot anything like on my own in this sort of way. Like we were just kind of like figuring it out as we go. And I think like I would make a film in that sort of way because I made a film about people that I loved, and we made a film about people that we cared about and a community that we grew to love. And to me, like that feels like it should be the North Star of our filmmaking like process, is like always doing things out of care and like empathy and finding the story later. Like the story isn't important. It's really like making sure that the journey that you're on with your subject is like about reflecting their journey in a way that feels authentic and beautiful and caring and like holding nuance in some sort of way. So I think like, would I jump into a 5-year film journey again immediately? Probably not. Like, I mean, I think we all need our whole film team needs a vacation. Hanif definitely needs a vacation. We all need vacations, but I think I wouldn't trade this experience for anything. If you asked me to go in a time machine and do it again, like we would both do it in a heartbeat.
What about you, Aman?
I mean, yeah, I mean, we couldn't be more proud with how the film came out. And so why would we do anything different? I mean, it really boils down to that. Yes, you could say, oh, I wish I did this, wish I did that. But the end result is the story that we have now. And again, it's not, we don't need the press. We're very fortunate to get good press and response or this or that. We don't need that as validation. There's just joy in the journey. This was a very hard film to make. Zeshawn and I, like, we both have full-time jobs, and we're going out to Jersey like every single weekend for like 4 or 5 years. We had no weekends to do anything, no social lives, like none of that. And we really put our heart and soul to it. Not only us, but our editors, our composers, Hanif, Raquan, Naz, like everybody gave this film their all. And I think that's what we're celebrating. It's not, oh, we made the New York Times or made this. It's just, we all put so much into this, and it's a joyful moment. And so absolutely, I would never I look back and I'm like, no, I wouldn't do anything differently, because it brought us, not only we made this film, but we all became closer together as a result of it. And so I just look back with just a tremendous amount of gratitude. In these past couple of days, I've just been thinking about, oh yeah, remember when this happened, and remember when we got stuck with this, or remember, when this happened, or we got turned down for this or that. And so there's a joy in the struggle, and that's what we celebrate.
I love this. I love this for you guys.
Thank you.
And so the next question is, how can the media, how can other Muslim communities stop excluding the Black Muslim narrative? Because there's so much of that going on, not just in the Muslim community, but like, what are some of I'm sure you guys learned so much from being involved in the community, and how can they stop doing that? Like, what are some actual like logistical things people can do, non-Muslim, Muslim, to stop excluding the Black Muslim narrative?
Stop being racist is probably the first step. It really just comes down to how important this is to you. This is humanity. These are people. These are our brothers and sisters. Faith aside, like, we are here together on this earth. This country that we live in was built by Black people and continues to be built by Black people. Our community, especially as a Muslim, Islam would not be a mainstream religion if it wasn't for Black American Muslims. Islam would not be dope and pop culture if it wasn't for Black American Muslims. All things dope in this society came from Black people, like, hard stop, period. Civil rights. As South Asians, I would not be in this country if it wasn't for the struggles of Black Americans fighting for their rights with the Civil Rights Act and way before that and all of that. We wouldn't even be allowed. The Hart-Celler Act that allowed people from South Asia and the Middle East and other parts of the world came after the Civil Rights Movement. So my existence purely here and the joy that I have in my life was because Black people laid the foundation for that. And if people aren't grateful for that, that is on them, and they need to check their racism, because that, to me, what it boils down to. And so by honoring that, people just want to be treated like human beings. Nobody's looking for any kind of special treatment or this or that. Treat people for their humanity. We all have a responsibility, whether as people of faith or just as human beings, is to fight and create safe and equitable spaces for all people. And so if you're not, and you have to prioritize that, not just in public settings or in professional settings, but in your life, in your heart. You have to prioritize that in every possible way.
Yeah, I mean, I think Aman said it really well, and I think the first thing that I think a lot of Muslim communities need to do is like unlearn the history that we've taught ourselves about Islam in America. Like first and foremost, I think there's this farce growing up, and especially in like a post 9/11 world, there was this like farce that like I was taught that like Islam was brought here through this immigrant lens, and I grew up in an immigrant community, but like it wasn't until honestly like I moved to a city like New York. I was in the Midwest and I was kind of shielded by this sort of like narrative of like I kind of othered Islam. Like I put myself through a lens of like immigration as a Muslim in America, without realizing that like my brother said, like Islam in America was built through the work of the Black Muslim community in so many ways, but also like why I thought was so beautiful about the morticians in Newark specifically is like the Black Muslim community has been creating the foundation of like Muslim intergenerational knowledge and care and like wealth and like, you know, love, like the roots that have been set on this country from a Muslim lens is through Black Muslim communities. Like, and it really like the roadmap is there. The problem is like there's been erasure. There's been a like sort of like a looking past of that, or an assumption that like we're building things from scratch, but it's like we have Black Muslim funeral directors, we have you know, Black Muslim or Muslim mentorship through Black Muslim communities. It's like it all has existed, but I think there's this like deep sort of work that I think the Muslim community needs to reckon with, of like unlearning our history and like learning what really happened. Yeah, and the last thing I'll say is growing up, you know, when I went to the mosque, Islam to me was always taught in the past tense. Oh, 1500 years ago, this happened, and then there was an empire after that, and then the 1700s, the end. I'm like, well, what about the past 300, 400 years? What's happened since then? Islam was always taught in the past tense, but it's continuously evolving and growing. And leading the way, you can't deny it, has been Black American Muslims. And so I think that's why it's important, because as a kid, when you're taught about things in the past tense, it makes it seem like, oh, we were great then, but we're whack now. We all fell apart and we're not cool. We're square. We're backwards, whatever. But it's important to bring in these stories, these honest, vulnerable stories, because that's what we take pride and joy in. And it wasn't until I got much older where I started reading more narratives, engaging myself in culture, and meeting more people, and people experiences different than my own, where I truly took joy. It's not that I was ashamed to be a Muslim, but it didn't penetrate my heart until, quite frankly, spending time with Black Muslims and engaging and learning about more narratives and learning about the history.
Thank you for that. So I think we're coming up on our time, so we'll do like maybe one or two more questions. So this one has been I'm excited to ask, but what is one thing that you learned about the Black Muslim community that you didn't know before?
Zeshawn, you take that one.
I feel like I want to hear your answer. What is coming to mind?
I will tell you this straight up. I've been, obviously I'm 30 Mosques in 30 days guy. I went to all 50 states, been to 34 countries. I have never felt closer to God than I do in predominantly Black American Muslim circles. Just hard stop, period. And there's just no phoniness. And every mosque says we welcome everybody and we're friendly and this and that, but they practice what they preach. Does communities have problems? Every community has issues and nuances and this and that, but I truly, truly, truly believe Black American Muslims, I'm not to paint as a monolithic entity, of course, but Black American Muslims that I've encountered in my life are living Islam the right way. And again, when I'm in these establishments, I've never felt, outside of like visiting Mecca and the Kaaba and all that, I've never felt closer to God than within Black American Muslim establishments. That's why I continue to go to predominantly Black Muslim mosques, because there's no phoniness and there's just a genuine there's just a genuineness to it.
The one thing that, in addition to that, like I think one of the things that I wish, like if we had to make like a spin-off film in any sort of way, like based on all the footage that we got so much incredible material. Actually, and one of the things that I felt like I learned so much, and I want to continue learning about, was the work that the funeral directors have done historically, like the funeral directors that we worked with in the film, but traditionally like Black Muslim funeral directors. There's such a rich legacy of like advocacy for this care that you see in the film. The fact that there are separate washing rooms where Muslims can be washed in funeral homes. The fact that we can have Muslims buried in simple pine boxes, and in some states just directly in the ground, as is according to Islamic tradition. That was advocacy that Black Muslim funeral directors did, like in many different ways. There was like fascinating stories that we learned from some of the funeral directors about, for example, in like the 80s and 90s, during the AIDS crisis, there was such a fear of how to prepare the dead. And Black Muslim funeral directors specifically had to advocate for janazas still to be happening as sort of like bodies were piling up. And they had to teach, they were in front of boards, telling people the janaza is this, we wash our dead because of this. And they were literally behind the scenes institutionalizing the janaza process in America through intensive trauma, like that was facing their communities during like a pandemic of sorts. And the same thing is happening during COVID. We've seen stories of Muslim communities, advocating for that. So one thing that I wish that I learned about, and I wish that this hopefully becomes more common knowledge, is the work that these Black Muslim morticians are doing to this day, but have done for decades, that have really like, this is a film about death. And the one thing that I wish we could have fit into this film was that piece of history. And that's something that I've learned and I feel very enriched by, and something that I feel very passionate about sharing with people, and hopefully that history is shared more widely because it's so important.
Yeah, your question just made me think of something that happened when we were filming in Newark. There was one day, there was a man who would always frequent the masjid, the mosque, and he was drunk. And he was just always in the community and just always asking for assistance. And he was really drunk that day, and he passed out. And these kids pulled out their phone and they're about to like record him and started to laugh. And a group of people very politely went up to them, pulled the phone away and said, "That is our brother and he is in pain. Make dua for him, pray for him. He is going through a very difficult time, and talk to him, support him." And I've seen things like that before at other mosques where they've called the cops on somebody like that. That if somebody was asking for money or is going through a tough time, they would call the cops on that person. There was just a tremendous sense of empathy that this is a brother that is going through pain, and let's do what we can to support him. And I think that's really what I really appreciate, not only this community, but other communities that I've had the opportunity to spend time in. There's just a tremendous sense of empathy. People see you the way you see yourselves, not how they interpret you or how you project yourself or anything like that. And I'll never forget that moment, though. They kindly corrected those boys and said, "That is our brother who is going through some pain."
Well, for our I guess the last question would be, before you wrap up, why should people see this film? Like, what's like, just briefly, like, what is like your pitch? Why should people see this film?
Want to take this, Zeshawn?
I think this is a film that kind of shows the ways in which I think communities, like Muslim communities, Black Muslim communities, communities of color, care for one another. And there's so much beauty and joy and heartbreak and sadness, and those all exist at the same time. And that's really what life is about. It's about navigating those difficult waters. And I think there's a real universality in that. Like this film, I think, despite its specificity, there's this really sort of like universal navigation of, what do you do when your faith is tested? What do you do when you're grieving? What do you do when you're struggling to heal? What do you do when you're struggling to find your community or your voice for the first time? Like, to me, like it's a true coming of age film in that sense, where like we resonate with coming of age stories because the one thing that unites us all is we grow up, everyone grows up and everyone dies. And this film holds both in this sort of like equal perspectives of like holding both of those things with equal care. So I think if anything, like see the film because hopefully it'll get you to reflect on some part of your life. And separately, I think like one of the things that I find more meaning in this film, and we've gone through a difficult year societally in so many ways because of COVID, because of the sort of, you know, the uprisings and the reckoning that we're doing in this country about the ways that Black communities have been treated. Like, I look at this footage through such different eyes now because of the ways in which, I mean, the Muslim community hasn't been able to wash bodies in the same way. We haven't been able to bury our loved ones in this sort of intimate lens. And I think it's important to see like how beautiful and important these traditions are. Not only the washings, but the traditions of care and mentorship and sort of like kind of, you know, caregiving. And like all of these things are so, so, so important because it's really like what we have that is going to keep us going. So yeah, I mean, my pitch is just, hopefully you see this film and see the sort of like many layers of sort of beauty of care that exists here.
I know we have a little bit of time left, and so I want to answer one of the questions that came up. So someone said, we're very happy to see Hanif on the film's Instagram the other day. We feel like we kind of know him. If you're comfortable with it, can you update on him, on what he's been up to and what everyone else is up to? Absolutely. Hanif is doing great. We just hung out with them this past weekend, and he's in good spirits. Nas is still locked up. It's been 3 years, and it just illustrates how awful and how terrible the criminal justice system is, especially when it comes to young Black men. He has not gone. Yeah, he's still going through it. It's just absolutely awful. For Quan, we couldn't be more prouder of the man that he is slowly starting to grow into. He is turning 17 this year. He's thinking about college. And a lot of and it's beautiful now because, you know, Furqan was 12 in the film when the film started. And a lot of the things that Hanif was trying to tell him, he'd be like, yeah, whatever, old man, whatever, old man. And now that he's older, he's starting to realize, like, wow, like Hanif really was there for me and really cared. And it's beautiful to see this bond. Furqan is still North Carolina, but it's beautiful to see the bond that they still have. They still talk very regularly. And Furqan is just such an amazing man that he's becoming, and very regularly will reach out to me and Hanif and be like, thank you all for, you know, everything you've done. I'm really grateful that you were always in my corner, and I love you. And it's really, really beautiful to see what they're all becoming and all they're growing into. And Nas as well. Nas is going through a tough time, but he's holding it down. His mother, Kira, may God continue to reward her for everything that she's had to do, and they're keeping their heads up and they're moving forward. And yeah, they've gone through struggles, but their struggles don't define them.
Well, thank you for that. This has been so enlightening. And I mean, like I said before, I saw the film and I did not know all this backstory. So thank you so much for being with us this evening. And I hope everyone enjoyed.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this, Leah. And please support Leah. Follow her on Instagram. Leah Vernon 2000. That's it, right?
L Vernon 2000.
L Vernon 2000. And get her book. The
Leah
book
V.
is legit hysterical. It's a very good book. I'm not just saying that because we're homies. It is an excellent book. Yes, in the comment. Leah Vernon 2000 or L Vernon 2000.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this, Leah.
All right. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.